All right, everybody, we are back. This is Creativity is the Cure. I'm your host, Malcolm Moore, and today I have my nephew, Drew Stahlkrantz. How you doing, Drew?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Could you tell everybody what you do for a living currently?
Sure. My technical role is a product marketing specialist at Nasdaq, and essentially a lot of what I do comes down to developing narratives and being creative with how our company talks about technical financial products. I thought a little bit about the theme of your podcast, and I think there's a lot of parallels. That's kind of the basics.
So 2 questions about that. What would a typical day for you at work be like? What would you do? Because to me and probably a lot of other people, it sounds kind of abstract.
Right. And it can be at some time. And honestly, I think one of the things I like about this kind of job for me is that it isn't a grind that I'm doing the same thing every day. So I guess I'll walk you through like maybe what a week looks like. So one day I'm talking to a super technical product team. I'm understanding what they're building and making notes to myself on how we can explain this to clients, to people internally in a way that they'll understand. And, different audiences are going to pick up on different things, but, a lot of this work comes down to translating stuff that's super technical into terms that different audiences will latch onto. And so then, the next day I might be working with the sales team and helping them understand what I've uncovered from a technical team. And then, another day I'm working with a creative team and developing a video script and an outline for how we would explain this to a public audience. So, the days are different. There's all kinds of different responsibilities that fall into a role like this, but it's actually a really creative job in my opinion.
Yeah, it sounds to me like you're a cross between some kind of a consultant and then a translator of information. Does that sound right?
Right.
So how would you be using the creative part of your brain to solve an issue at work? Give me one example if you could.
Sure. Projects that we're working on at Nasdaq right now involve how we move the traditional financial world into the future. How do we develop the next generation of a financial global network? A lot of these other global exchanges, the banking system, a lot of these institutions are very old and they're kind of stuck in their ways and the ways that they've done things for a long time that have been successful for a long time.
It sounds like an issue that's going on all over the planet with everything right now.
Exactly. So how do we create a narrative and how do we explain to them why they need to upgrade their systems, why they need to integrate with the rest of the world and not stay siloed in the ways that they're doing things.
Right.
So unpacking that, all the way from how do we technically get this done? How do we upgrade your data center? That is a really confusing and expensive task to do. But what is that going to unlock for your customers, for your employees, and for the global economy at large? Kind of breaking down those different segments of the narrative and making sure that we can deliver that the way that we're talking about it is one of the bigger problems that I would say that the teams that I'm working with are solving.
Yeah, it's actually reminded me of that really popular show Succession, where the father who's been in media forever is battling with the younger people that are trying to tell them that the world's not the same anymore.
Right. And it's hard. And I feel for the people that we're working with because, it's got to be hard to have achieved a lot of success. If you're running one of these institutions, the people that are making the purchase or the decisions to upgrade or change things, they've lived a very successful life. And the things that they've accomplished in life, came from thinking about the world in the ways that they did. And so when you've got, a younger, more tech savvy company coming in and telling you that, this is the future, this is, you've got to make some changes if you want to stay competitive. I can understand why that's hard to digest at first. So that's part of being tactful in how we approach engaging these institutions and understanding that perspective that they have and how we can smooth any transitions that are going to take place.
Right. And I feel like a lot of us, myself included, as I'm about to turn 55, we're feeling a little bit alienated because technology and the world is changing so quickly.
Right.
Whether you believe Kurzweil's book, The Singularity, I mean, it is occurring at a really frantic pace. And no matter who you are, it's going really quickly. And as I'm a teacher, I see younger kids and work with them all the time. And I'll often hand my phone to them because they're going to show me 10 things my phone does that I had no idea.
Right.
So let's go way back in time. What is your first creative memory? When is the first time that you can remember that you were thinking outside of the box?
I'm going to go with the first thing that came to mind. And for me, our family growing up, my dad really loved skiing. And my siblings and I loved skiing and snowboarding. And it was a really cool family activity that we got to do quite often. And it was, so when I think back to my early teen years and when I really started getting good at snowboarding, I think about being creative on the mountain, about thinking of new paths, about moving around obstacles and choosing my course in creative ways. And that was kind of a really freeing, expressive experience for me.
Escape too, right? From the rest of life.
Right, exactly. And just kind of flowing on the mountain and connecting with nature and myself and, listening to music while I'm doing it. It was that really stands out to me as this, being able to almost feel like you're painting a picture on the mountain as you move across it.
Yeah, that's a great example, almost like a metaphor for the rest of your life.
Right.
How about music? You and I haven't talked about this in a long time. What hardware and software do you like to do if you're going to sit down later today and make some music?
Yeah, my favorite is Ableton.
Same. I love it.
I've used Ableton for a long time. You can get really nitty gritty with it. I like that you have the spectrum. You can get super nitty gritty, and you can also just kind of play with layering stuff easily.
It was originally made for live DJs, so I think that's why you and I like the hands-on approach, right?
Yeah, and I really love it, and I love all of the kind of add-ons and modular stuff you can do with it. I just love the software. I couldn't really get. I know that I have some friends who are more into production, and they will use other kind of more studio software. But I love Ableton because you can do the production stuff, but you can also do the freeform stuff. I've, DJ'd shows just with Ableton. So I like that you can really do, the full spectrum from production to performance on Ableton. I think it's really cool.
And what do you use as a controller? What are you comfortable with?
I usually use the Push 2. I have one. I've used that for shows. It's got the keyboard style functionality, so you can also kind of build melodies with it, build drum tracks with it. But it's also got some really cool tools for, moving tracks along when you're playing live.
I also I do the podcast with Ableton, and nice. I just used a template, but then I customized it. So to throw an interview like this in there and edit it is just lightning fast.
Right.
How about your mom and dad? Do you think that their creative identity was passed on to you at all genetically? What part of your creative self do you think you got from your mom, and what part from your dad?
That's a great question. And, I think I definitely think it was, whether it was a nature versus nurture thing. I can't be 100% sure if it's necessarily in my DNA, but, I know that I am the product of a Swedish financial executive and an American writer.
That's definitely a correlation.
So I think it makes a lot of sense that I am working in a creative capacity in the finance world. I think on that level, yes. When I think about, my example of snowboarding and skiing, I think I got that from my dad. I think I've never seen him more free and comfortable than when he was on the mountain. And I think I took a lot of the influence of how I could express myself athletically in nature from him.
Right.
So I get that. And my mom is a brilliant writer. And I think a lot of, my ability to express myself in written form and verbally comes from learning from her and seeing her work and everything she's done through her life.
Yeah, I think it's a great combination because when I think about you, you must be able to really compartmentalize a lot of different things in your brain as you do your job.
Right.
All right.
And it really requires that ability to bridge the gap between technical understanding of things with a creative flow. And so that's hugely important.
Yeah. Now a really fun question. Tell me, who are three of your favorite creative musicians and why? Who inspires you? Who do you like to listen to?
So I really like this guy, Nicholas Jaar, Jaar, classically trained Chilean musician. But, when we talked about my kind of, the music style, and to be clear, I'm more of a musical hobbyist. I'm not like as professional as you, but, when I think of people who, remix music live and play really, if they're playing a show, they're not just, loading up CDJs and playing a bunch of tracks back to back on sync.
Yeah.
They're really, doing a live performance with live musical instruments included with whatever they're doing on Ableton. I think of Nicholas Jaar. I encourage people to look into his stuff. So he really inspired me when I kind of started getting into music on my own. Artists like when I was in college, Avicii was coming up.
Right. Yeah. Very popular out here.
He was huge at his time, but when I heard his early stuff, I was really taken aback by he was able to capture a lot of elements of kind of the underground EDM scene and bring that into the mainstream and just bring massively relatable vocals into his music. And he was had a huge impact in that era, the kind of like the early 2010s. Also a Swedish guy, and a lot of the Swedish EDM artists in that era, Swedish House Mafia, I was really into a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I really love Deadmau5.
Yeah, I was thinking of bringing him up because I think the same thing. It sounds like a big part of your life is helping different groups of people relate to each other. And I think for somebody my age, in the 90s, I started listening to EDM with people like BT and Prodigy. And you're right. Yeah. A lot of these guys that you listen to or I started out are really bringing this language to the mainstream. Would you agree?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I love that. I love, and it's like back to kind of like the translation theme that we were talking about before. Like, how do we translate what's great about this genre into something that's palatable for a larger audience? And how do we bring that feeling and that vibe to more people, And I love artists that can do that.
Yeah, I think that's true because when I was a little bit younger than you, the whole deal was going to underground raves. And now it's just one of the biggest music forms in the world. Right. And we can't forget Daft Punk, too, who's still left their mark on the world with all kinds of stuff.
Yep, exactly.
Do you think creativity could be implemented in curing people or helping people with mental health struggles like depression, anxiety? Any specific insight on that?
Sure. My creativity, has always been an outlet. I might have different channels that I express it with. At certain points in my life, I was more into the music stuff and expressing myself that way. At other points, it's involved in my work. I was just listening to Ethan Hawke, a YouTube video he did a few years back. And he was talking about creative expression as like the core human essence, and like being able to let it flow through you is how you get to the best version of yourself and feel the best about yourself. So I do think that finding ways to do that and channels for people to express themselves can go a long way in helping with, some of that stuff that you're talking about. I know when I, have struggled with depression and anxiety, being able to just sit down at Ableton and feel like the music is flowing through me and feel like it's not even me necessarily doing something. It's like I'm picking up on something else that's much bigger than me, and it's just kind of flowing through me. And that's one of the coolest feelings in the world, and like when I see, someone like John Mayer soloing with Dead & Co., I get the sense that he's doing that too, that it's just kind of going through him and he's just a channel for that. I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's a great example. Have you ever used the creative side of your brain to solve a major challenge in your life? And when I say that, I don't really mean artistically. I mean, just how about thinking outside the box? Like even a small thing that you had to overcome, maybe change in your vocation or moving from one area to another?
Well, I think here's one that's coming to mind that's it's maybe a little heavy, but as you know, Malcolm, my father passed away about 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was a really, really dark period in my life. When we talk about struggling with stuff internally.
And let's not forget, he was such a great guy, such a unique guy. So that must have been very tragic for you.
Right. And it was, and, luckily your family, our whole family really, was so supportive during that time. But, it was really hard for me because a big part of my reality completely crumbled. It left me decimated for a little while. And I think that the creativity comes in realizing that in the depth of that pain and not knowing where my life would go next or what to do next, I had to get creative and realize that I had to change a lot of things in my life. I had to change the way that I was living. I had to change my outlook. I had to forge my own path in life.
Right.
Whereas for up until that point, I was, in a lot of ways following his lead, as I think a lot of young men do when it comes to their father. And, it really forced me to step up in a lot of ways.
Right.
And so I think that took a lot of creative thinking. I think it took a lot of willingness to be open-minded to new ways of doing things and changing my outlook and just having to change almost everything about the way I had been living life up to that point.
Almost feels like the safety net has been pulled out from under you, right?
Right, exactly. In some ways, I know that it, has culminated in what I've become today and given me a lot of strength and belief in myself. So, in some ways,
that's a great perspective.
I'm grateful for that experience. Yeah, I have to be grateful for that experience. But of course, I miss my father. I'm so grateful for everything that he gave me in life. He and my mother, that was that. I think for everyone, and I know you lost your father last year, my grandfather. Yeah. I think it's a defining moment in all of our lives when we lose our parents. Yeah.
Nobody can understand it until it happens. And this is off the top of my head, but I want to ask you about something that I still struggle with every day from losing my father and my mother, who was your grandmother.
Right.
One thing I think about is it really sucks when you become successful after your parents go. Yeah. I remember talking with my dad about this, and he went through the same thing. When he lost his parents, he finally reached success, and you almost wish that they were here to witness that. But I don't know about you, but a lot of times I'll just go for a walk and start talking to my dad or my mom. And that seems to me to be a creative way to deal with this thing that we can't quite wrap our minds around. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that I think about too, not only with my dad, but with your dad, with Dun, my grandfather. But I also remember that they did see successes in our lives. Maybe what we think, we wish they saw a certain level of success or a certain level of achievement. But, my experience with my father and Dun was that they were cheering every step of the way. And, and I'd like to think that there is some aspect of them that is aware of what's going on in our lives now and is, in my heart feel supported by whatever piece of them is out there.
Right. Same thing. I mean, I try to keep some things I still have that remind me of them. My dad loved Gregory Peck. That's who inspired him to be a lawyer. So we have a big autographed photo of him in our library. And then in my studio, my mom loved Georgia O'Keeffe. So I made sure to put a big prominent painting by her right over my mixing desk.
Nice. Great.
It's good to just keep them in your mind. I mean, nobody has any answers, but I like to think that they're still with us somehow.
Yep. Me too.
two very serious questions that I've been thinking about that I'd like to throw your way. Obviously, there's a lot of very challenging issues going on in the world right now. The last time that I remember it being this bad was maybe the 1970s.
Yeah.
But the world is looking pretty difficult lately. So I was reading this article this morning that was called, "Why Are U.S. Politicians So Old? And Why Do They Want to Stay in Office?" This is by Kalpana Jain of theconversation.com. And I was really caught off guard. I mean, I'm so frustrated with the government, not only of our country, but different governments all over the world. And part of me goes, why is everybody so old? Why are they stuck in these old ways, like you're saying about what you kind of do for a living? And part of me wishes that some people your age would take over, because I think the old regime, those concepts are just not working anymore. And here's a great example. Kalpana's article, she says, a local pharmacist on Capitol Hill made headlines a few years ago when he revealed that he was filling Alzheimer's medication prescriptions for members of Congress. Every one of the 20 oldest members of Congress is at least 80. And this is the third oldest House and Senate since 1789. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there are a few dimensions to that. I think one aspect, my generation and potentially the younger generations as well.
Just so everybody knows, you're in your mid 30s, right?
Right. So I'm a millennial. I'm like smack in the middle of a millennial. I think, the sense that I get is that a lot of us feel disillusioned with the political system in general. And like, there doesn't seem to be much of a movement, people my age, to want to get involved in politics beyond maybe voting. I think it's, I think we've just been between all of the crises that we've lived through in our, since the early 90s.
Right.
It's like, what's the benefit of getting involved in this? You see the few people that do get into positions of power that are maybe from a younger generation, and they're not really able to make the difference that you thought they might. And you just get kind of jaded by the whole political system. I'll speak for myself, but that's a little bit how it feels. So I think what a lot of us have taken to doing is finding other avenues of making a difference, whether that's through the work that we're doing at companies or creatively. I think that's kind of, the track that a lot of the younger generations have been taking, rather than trying to get involved in the political system, which we're all feeling a little bit let down by.
Right.
So, I think that's one important aspect of it, but I don't think it's that our generations don't care.
Right.
I know for me, it's not that I don't care. It's just that, I guess I'm in a place where I'm working on improving myself and improving the lives of the people closest to me, and starting with that. And then from there, maybe I can make a difference. Whereas, maybe when I was in my 20s, I was very idealistic and I wanted to really change the world. And what I've come to realize is that, I can be much more impactful if I change myself first and then help the people around me. And then hopefully that ripples out. And if everyone does that on a regular basis, then we can get some real change.
I think that's where it's going to start. Yeah, and I can relate because I'm a teacher and I have 800 very diverse students. So if I can teach them to be kind and respectful to each other and realize we all have more in common than different, I mean, that's the best thing I can do every day. Give them some hope. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. And I, like everybody else, feel kind of hopeless when I look at the news. Yeah. I think that's the best thing that we can do. And, when I go around and talk to people of all different beliefs and political stances, I'm finding most people are pretty good people. And although they might vote in a way that you don't agree with, I think we all have the same basic needs and beliefs. But part of the problem is so many people live out in the middle of nowhere. And I think especially those people are going to need to try to get with groups of different people to see eye to eye and see that there's not that much difference between human needs. I mentioned this in one other podcast, but somebody that that recently passed away, Rusty Olson.
Right.
He was such a great guy. When I was a minister many years ago, he invited me to become part of a group that what we would do, even though we were both Christian, we'd go around and meet with Muslims and Hindus and Jews and just spend time with them. And I already felt really good around all kinds of people, but I think that experience magnified everything for me.
Yeah, that's amazing.
The last question I have for you, you and I are big fans of the show Mr. Robot that was on for about 4 years. And for people that haven't seen it, I'm just going to read the premise here and then ask you the question. The series follows Elliot Anderson, a young man living in New York City who works at the cybersecurity company AllSafe as a cybersecurity engineer, constantly struggling with social anxiety, dissociative identity disorder, clinical depression, drug abuse. Elliot's thought process seems heavily influenced by paranoia and delusion. He connects with people by hacking them, which often leads him to act as a cyber vigilante. Then he is recruited by a mysterious insurrectionary anarchist known as Mr. Robot, and he joins his team of hacktivists known as F Society. One of their missions is to cancel all consumer debt by encrypting all the data of one of the largest corporations in the world, eCore, which Elliot perceives as Evil Core, which also happens to be AllSafe's biggest client. I think when this was originally out, I think it stopped in, 2019? I remember you and I talking about it, and you're like, dude, that's already occurring. With recent events this week that have been on the news, I was starting to go, wow, Drew was right. This is really going on. And it's part of younger generations being frustrated with a lot of the BS out there of governments that are not effective anymore. And this, unless we change things peacefully, I think will be inevitable. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. For me personally, like the writing has been on the wall for a long time that, themes that, are talked about in that show have been happening at different scales. And I think that's the most important thing to take in mind is that these themes of oppression and prejudice and certain groups taking advantage of other groups have been going on for all of human history. I think now just the stage is so visible for everyone to see it. There are a lot of things that are coming to a head. I will say I am much more positive in my outlook than probably when we spoke in 2019.
That's good to hear.
I
hope it's contagious.
Right. And it comes back to, what we were just talking about before is like, there, of course, there are so many problems in the world, but if I can work on myself and the people around me on a regular basis, I'm in a much better headspace. And if I can not overly focus on the news and all of these things that are coming to a head that are at the end of the day outside of my control,
right?
Then I can be in a much better place to be have a positive impact on the people around me today and potentially more people in the future. And if I'm in that headspace, then it's a lot easier for me to handle all of these tough things that are coming out that we're finding out about now. So yeah, I guess I would just finish it with that is that, I hope that, as more things, come to the surface and realizations are made that, people can move beyond the anger and frustration once, they see it. I think we're seeing a lot of that happening right now. And I really hope that everyone in this world can come together because I do think that's the next phase of this. It's a decision that we all have to make collectively. Do we want to run the system and ourselves into the ground, or do we want to evolve as a society? And I think if we can have that positive outlook on a personal level, it is contagious, and we can help everyone kind of achieve that, and we can do that together.
I love that outlook. It sounds to me like you're saying with all the cracks in the foundation, as they used to say, I hope a tree grows in Brooklyn, right?
Right.
All right. Well, since you're on such a great positive note, let's end with a quote by a famous philosopher, an author that you and I love, Alan Watts.
Yes.
He once said, to have faith is to trust yourself to the water. When you swim, you don't grab hold of the water because if you do, you'll sink and drown. Instead, you relax and float. What's your response to that?
I think that's a great quote. Faith has become a really important part of my existence, especially in, the last 5-10 years, and it's part of what we were just talking about and having faith in humanity, having faith in others. If I'm trying to grip the water and I'm trying to control how the water is flowing around me and how reality is flowing around me, I'm going to have trouble. I'm not going to make progress. But if I work with the flow of the universe and reality and the water in this example, then I can move and I can exist in this world in a positive way. So I love that quote.
Yeah, that's great. And I think we all know, and you know now as you're getting older, that we absolutely have no control of anything. And the only thing we have,
Right.
if it comes down to one thing we have control of, it's how to respond or not respond, right?
Right.
All right, Drew Stahlkrantz, this has been great. Would you agree to come back sometime soon and continue the conversation with me?
Of course.
All right, man. Good to talk to you. Talk to you soon.